Good afternoon, friends, family, loved ones, enemies, contributors, distractors. This is Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint. And this week's show is called Dress Code. And I'd like to thank Isha for showing up, my niece Jazz, and everyone else who shows up on this discussion today. And this is something that I do think that I would like for us to have a discussion on. I appreciate you showing up, Andrea. This is something that I think that many will probably have a comment on, and probably later in the show more than um, earlier in the show. But when we're talking about dress code, I know like right now we're dealing with the virus and corona thing, and this is a thing that everyone's talking about. And I want to step away from that conversation to interact. I know probably people are getting tired of it, and but one thing we want to do is stay safe and keep our distancing and things like that. But on this show, when we're talking about the dress code, and normally when we speak on a dress code, what we're talking about is like the parameters of how you should be dressing and things like that. Normally, like we have a dress code at work, or if we have a get together or we're going to some kind of occasion, we say, well, what's the dress code? And that's the parameters, how they want you to dress or what's permissible and how you dress. Now, on this show, when we're talking about dress code, we're talking about something a little bit different. I'm talking about the noun dress, as in what women wear, and now sometimes men are wearing, sometimes little boys are wearing. And that's what the topic is going to be on the dress code. And a lot of things that I talk about on the Blueprint, like on previous shows, I like to, everything is interlinked. And on this show today, we're going to talk about anti-mimesis and Aristotelian mimesis and life imitating art, art imitating life, and how that affects us. And we're going to talk about a lot of philosophical things and psychological things, gender-related things like that. And sometime we like to get, I like to get deep into things. So I would like to get a lot of feedback. And just I appreciate Kayla for showing up, and Dee Dee, and Teaspoon. What's up, man? I know you missing being out there with the kids, man, but we'll get through this. And Deborah, and my man I appreciate you showing up. Now, what the first thing that we're going to talk about is subliminal, and then we're going to talk about now the reason I say, well, we're going to get into subliminal. Of course, many of us know what subliminal means. Subliminal means in psychology, subliminal means when you're operating, it's stimuli that's operating below the threshold of your sensations or your consciousness. It's things that you receive subconsciously. And we're going to talk about being operating above and below the threshold. And what that threshold is, a conscious threshold. And we're going to talk about things that are introduced to us subliminally. And another word we're going to use is superliminal. And philosophically, superliminal is a perception. It's a stimuli that's above the threshold. That's it's working above the absolute threshold of consciousness, where you know where you're aware of the environment, and it's stimuli that's basically ignored by the person that's receiving it, and you're aware of your environment and their environmental cue, but not aware of the influence that it's having on you. So it's something that that's there over the top, that's being said or done, and you realize it, but the effect goes by the person that's receiving it. And I'm going to talk about why I'm bringing up those two things. And of course, on the Blueprint, I've stated before, I feel that we as a people, black people, brown people, are at war. And sometimes we are not realizing the war that's being waged against us. And we go about things in a normal fashion, and we accept things. And if you start to understand the war that's being waged on you, and by whom, then you are better able to prepare for it. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because it was something like with this corona thing. It was a post that I saw someone um, put on Facebook, and I shared it, and it said something like it said like white people understand that black people make jokes out of things um, when we go through hard times. Black people make jokes of things, of situations, and it doesn't mean that we're not sensitive to it. We like to make jokes out of our hard times. So even though we make jokes about the corona thing and people are dying, but it's like we make jokes to get through things. Now, if we know this, you have to understand that those who oppose you, that study you, know this. And in Lao Tzu's, I'm sorry, in Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War, it explains that you have to study your enemy, study your adversary, if you want to find out ways to impose your will on your adversaries or to conquer your adversaries. And when I'm saying we're at war, this is why I bring up the book Art of War, because there are tactics that are being used to impose someone's will against you and influence you and to conquer, make you submissive, if I could say that. And these things are introduced to you subliminally, in a subliminal fashion, and in a superliminal fashion. And that's why I brought up those two words. You have to understand what's happening. And what the dress code is going to talk about is how these things are introduced to us and how we have accepted things and how that have made a change on us in our culture and our environment, which is our neighborhoods and our communities. Because see, if you change someone's culture, you can change their community. You change the way that we operate. You change the way that we operate amongst each other. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Things that may weaken the nuclear family, which when we're talking about a nuclear family, we're talking about a man and a woman and a child, that type of household. In ways that things are happening that weakens that household. And I spoke about before when we used to have those black exploitation films in the early 70s, the Mac, Dolomite, things like this, Superfly. That was, in as far as I'm concerned, targeting our communities, black exploitation. That's what it was. And being a player and all this stuff, that was going against the whole concept of having a nuclear family, where you were being a player. Everybody wanted to be the Mac. Everybody wanted to be a player. Everybody wanted to have a bunch of women. No, none of the movies were positive or presented a positive role model for us as young men, saying, hey, yeah, this is something cool. This is having a wife and having children and being something positive in the community. No, they was doing the opposite. And we saw the after effects. We saw the residual effects of that. Everybody wants to be a player. Everybody wants to be a pimp. Everybody wants to downgrade our women. Then we complain about it afterwards. When those young men dealing with young women, you get older, it's like, man, these guys always. But if you look at what society has presented to us as role models and what the arts have presented to us as role models, then you wonder, and you're still wondering how we got to the point that we've got. But we have, things have influenced us. And when you're talking about anti-mimesis, is the art is being used to influence us. As opposed to Aristotelian mimesis, where they say, well, all the art is just an imitation of, arts are just an imitation of people. It's just a representation. Anti-mimesis is like, nah, well, sometimes they use art to influence you, and that's what I'm talking about today. And if we think about the generation coming up, we always say, well, this generation is ultra violent, it's real violent, and all the stuff that was happening. If you think about the movies that came out that influenced a lot of the black and brown community, you look at Scarface, Goodfellas, Casino, things like that, and then you hear our rappers, they gave their names like Gambino, even Nas, it was Nas Escobar, things like that. Everybody was Scarface, even the rapper Scarface. It's like they were being influenced by the movies that was out and everything. Those movies were putting gangsters on a pedestal. And then, of course, you had a whole generation that wanted to be gangsters, and everybody was a gangster, and everybody, was ruthless, and everybody wanted to take on that persona. Well, the generation before that, everybody wants to be a player and a pimp and all this stuff and downgrade our women. And so art was used as a weapon against us. So this is what I want to talk about when I'm talking about subliminal messages and superliminal perception in a philosophical sense. And I'd like to thank Mario for showing up, and Derek and Denise and Jesse. I appreciate you showing up to the blueprint. So when we look at things, the arts, and what I'm also going to introduce is something called abstraction in philosophy, in generalization in philosophy, talking philosophical terms. I know we know what generalization is, but abstraction, like when you're talking about art and abstraction, me being an artist or a former artist, I really don't do any artwork anymore. Abstract art was something that wasn't just plain to see. An illustration. I was more of an illustration artist, which means I wanted details. I wanted you to see what I was doing. I want to paint this picture and you know exactly what you're looking at, and even fool your eyes and say, man, this looks real. It looks like the eyes can move. That's an illustrator. I want details. But abstract art is when you don't really know what you're looking at, and it's just, it's attracting to you, but it's abstract. It's no definition that you could just get. I may get something from it. You may get something different from it. I may see some type of value in it, and you may see something totally different as a value. That's abstract. But in abstraction and philosophy, what abstraction is, it's a process of a concept of formation of recognizing like attributes in individuals, persons, or places, or whatever, or things. You're recognizing attributes, and you pulling from something. And my example will be like, I know like last week I was talking about the Wizard of Oz, and I probably didn't go into enough detail on why I selected that, but part of that is that's being used in that movie was abstraction, and the character that was used in abstraction. Let me explain what abstraction is. Abstraction, like I said in layman terms, I would put it like this: you take something, and that exemplifies. If I said danger, something that's dangerous, and if I could say choose an animal, or choose anything that you would say, just one image of something that's dangerous or poisonous or venomous. A lot of times people would choose like a snake or something like that. Or it's your perception of what you choose. Like, and if I say, well, snakes are venomous, venom is poison to people. So anytime I see the image of a snake, that's fear, that's danger, that's poison. And another thing is like a lion. What we take from a lion is courage. And that's what they used in Oz, in the Wizard of Oz. The lion was the one lacking courage, which was an abnormality, because normally when we think of a lion, he exemplifies courage. So that's what when we abstract. We take something from an individual or a thing, and we get an image or an attribute. A lion is courage. And when we generalize, we say all lions are courage. All snakes are dangerous. Things like that. All black people, that's a generalization. Whatever you say, black people, lazy, Mexicans, this, black women, loud, aggressive. It's a generalization as an abstraction of generalization. That's what I'm hope I'm not getting too deep into that, but that's in a generalization, and that's what we do in society. A lot of times, those things by others look upon us as being in a generalization type scope. Like they'll say, well, black men, that's dangerous. Black men, they're no good. They're not fathers. They're not this. They're not that. Black women, loud, aggressive, they generalizing and they're abstracting a generalization, and they're using it every time they see a black person. So this is what we're talking about when I'm saying abstraction and generalization. And the reason I'm getting into that is in the dress code, a lot of times our kids are introduced to things. And a lot of times those introductions are done by us as parents and as individuals in our society. A lot of times they're done by others. And this is what we have to be careful and cognizant of. What are you, if I wanted my kids to have any kind of perception of what a father is, then I need to exemplify what I want them as a father to see and to take. If they say, well, what do you think as a protector? Well, my dad. You know, that's how I would want it to be, whether it is that or not. What do you see as a pillar, a provider, you know? And as a mother, you, whatever you want that your kids, the imprinting that you want to have on a kid, that, or your child, I'm sorry, as a child, you want them to see a mother as what, and they will see a mother as whatever you are to them, a comforter, a provider, and you know, a home keeper. You know, if you're a mother and you don't keep a good home, then your kids are not going to think as a mother growing up younger until they start venturing out and they start saying, well, you know, dang, this so-and-so's mom cooks good, and you know, at my house, all we eat is McDonald's and Peter Piper's and things like that. You know, to them that would be normal until they venture out. But if you want to exemplify something that they can abstract from you and say, this is what a mother is. A mother is a person that's nurturing, caring, whatever it is that you want them to take from you, then that's what you have to present. And that's what we have to present as parents and as individuals in our community. A lot of times people will say, well, Kevin, this is how you are. This is how I see you. This is how, you know, you're stringent as this and you're, you know, whatever. And it may be right or wrong or whatever, but that's how they see me and that's what I present to them. And that's what we have to be cognizant of. Others may have a different, or try to perceive us in a different way, and it's generalized in society. Black men are this. Black men are not good fathers. Black men don't care about these kids. And that's why I get into having a post where I say project our own positive images, hashtagging it to say anytime you search that, you should have a gallery full of pictures of black men and kids, because that's a fight against what society is putting out about black men. You know, we got coaches out there dealing with kids all the time, and they try to make it as if, okay, we don't care about kids. But no, it's like, you know, we got to project our own images to combat the images that are being projected about us, the generalization, the abstraction that's going on. And I hope I didn't deviate too much from the subject. Now, we're talking about the dress code, and I was talking about war. And if you think about things that's being subliminal, if you think about the Trojan horse and things like that in the war in Troy, where they, the Trojans, it was a gift, a big wooden horse, and it had something inside that, and that would be my analogy of something that's a lot of these movies and the arts are presenting. There's something inside that's dangerous to us. And in 1967, there was a movie called She-Man, and you think about that time frame, like that was, I don't know when in '67, but you know, that's probably around, I was probably not born or whatever, but 1967 is a movie called She-Man. It was a comedy slash drama thriller. And if you think about what this movie was about, it was about a soldier being blackmailed by a violent transgender, or a transvestite, I'm sorry, a violent transvestite to take estrogen and wear lingerie. Now, somewhere in there that was funny, and somewhere in there that was a drama or whatever. But this is things that's art is starting to introduce. And you would never think that they would make a movie with a violent transvestite. Like, wow. And I'm reading this, I'm like, for real? Like, really? Like, how would that come across today? Now, that was in '67. And that was art. And to me, this is what I'm saying. This is things that they tried to introduce to us. And when we're talking about a dress code, when has it become okay or normal for men to be wearing dresses, or we see a man in a dress or a boy in a dress and things like that, and it doesn't have that much of an impact on us? What is the process that has happened where has the abstraction taken form in the arts? And I'm talking mainly in the arts. And I remember when I was growing up, and as a kid, and in fact, this is they used to tell me, man, it was a Flip Wilson show. In 1970 was the first episode, and when I was a young kid, I don't remember seeing like the first episode. I don't know. They probably was replaying episodes. But my dad used to call me Flip. They used to say I looked like Flip Wilson. And I used to see this show on there. But what Flip Wilson used to do, it was a comedian. It was a show where they had almost like it's a comedian show where they would have skits and things on there. But also part of the skits that Flip Wilson would do, he would do a part where he dressed up as a woman with a wig on, lipstick, makeup, everything like that. Heels, dresses. He was wearing a dress. And his character was Geraldine. He would try to talk like a woman and, you know, of course, he was being a black woman. And he exaggerated. There was a lot of exaggeration that was funny to people. Here you have a man wearing a dress, wearing makeup, wearing a wig, and it was funny. And what I'm bringing, the reason I'm saying, a lot of times when people want to introduce to you something, especially us as black people, what they do is they use it in a form of comedy. Because, okay, it's funny. It's okay because it's funny. You know, we're not looking at it. It's a subliminal thing that what you're doing, you're having a man. What's funny about a man wearing a dress? If I say, well, you know, I'm going to put on some high heels, I'm going to put on a dress, I'm going to put on a wig, and I'm going to talk like this or act like this. And to me, that's not funny. But other people would say, well, that's funny, you know, to see a man struggling in heels and knowing what I have to do and knowing what we have to deal with. Well, we're still not going to know what you have to deal with as a woman because we're not the same. Anatomically, we're not the same. We're not supposed to be able to wear heels comfortably. I mean, a lot of women don't wear heels comfortably. But for some reason, for people to see that, that's funny. And that's what Flip Wilson show. As me as a young kid, I was being introduced to that, and everybody used to laugh. I was reading the comment. I appreciate that, bro. My man Wilbur said he remembered that tiger that I painted. I have a picture of that, and yeah, my dad actually has that, and I have a picture of that. But yeah, it's so that was, you know, an introduction, but it was funny. And if we look at throughout the years, even Martin Lawrence, the Martin Lawrence show. Now, Martin Lawrence is a comedian that's regardless, but then what they also permitted, and somewhere in there, we thought it was funny for him to dress up as Shanae Jenkins. And Martin Lawrence was in the early 1990s. I believe it first aired in 1992. But he would do the same thing. He would dress up as, and his skit and part of the show, he dressed up as Shanae, and it was exaggerated. You know, the attitude that they were, that we was abstracting. That was an abstraction that we were putting out on a black woman. But it was funny, you know. And the thing that there was a subliminal part to that, and then it was a superliminal, because you knew that was Flip Wilson dressed as a woman. Because if Flip Wilson had a mustache, he still had his mustache, and you knew who it was, and that's what made people laugh. But also what it was doing was saying, it's funny, it's okay. You know, it's okay because it's funny. Same thing with Martin Lawrence. Then we had, after that, we had the Jamie Foxx show in 1996, the late 1990s. Same thing. Great comedian. He's funny as it is, but then he had to have a character where he's in a dress. The dress code coming back again. And with the Jamie Foxx, he was dressed as Wanda. You know, the same thing that just being introduced to us in a way that is funny. So it's okay. Nobody's going to say, well, you gay, you this. And it's because it's comedy, and it's okay. But they're introducing that to us. And subliminally, it's like, okay, well, it's kind of funny to see this, and everybody's laughing. And I'm going down the line, if we look at In Living Color, 1990s, Jim Carrey. Now, he's not black, he's not brown, but it's the same thing. And he was doing Vera DeMilo, you know, where he was dressed up as a woman that looks like a dude. He had the ponytails in his hair. Sometimes he'll have on like a bra, bikini top, things like that. and he's over the top, and it's over the top because he's not really looking very feminine, but it's funny to us. And these are things that's introduced to us psychologically. And this is what I want us to be cognizant of, and how things have the process of where we're at today. How do we get to where we're at today? Things have been introduced. Richard Pryor used to do this in the movie JoJo Dancer. I think that came out in 1987, 86, about his life. But he did a skit in drag where he came on stage and he was in makeup, and you could tell it was him, and it wasn't anything, but it was like, that's, you know, meant to be funny or whatever. Some of our greatest comedians have done this, and have done this in movies. Martin came back when he did Big Mama's House, you know, dressed as a big woman, an older woman, and you know, he's dealing with the boobs. He's dealing with a guy trying to push up on him. And the movie White Chicks with the Wayans brothers, the younger Sean, I forgot the other brother name, but they did White Chicks, right? And Marlon and Sean, and that came out in 2004. And they had a whole movie, and people said, man, you need to go see this. And in my mind, I was like, I don't want to see that. And I had my reasons, but people like, well, you're too sensitive and things like that. But my thing is, at that point in 2004, I had things that I'm speaking about now. I had anti-mimesis on my mind, because I'm thinking, you know, this is not funny to me. And what you're projecting and what you're presenting to me is not funny. Now, if they could have had white men or white males or whatever, and I think Dave Chappelle did this on his show, where he didn't dress up as a white woman. He had a character as a white man, you know, and it was same effect. It's like, okay, a black person trying to act white. I remember Richard Pryor used to do skits like that where he didn't actually dress up, but he would do skits, and it was funny. You know, this is how a white man act. Or Eddie Murphy would do that on his Raw Delirious here, but this is how this person acts. And he acts like a person that's not your gender, but I mean, not gender, not your race. And it was funny. But you don't have to dress up as, you could be a black woman acting or dressing up as a white woman, and vice versa, if you want to get those type of laughs. But for some reason, to have the man going to another gender was over the top funny for us, and that's what was presented to us. Even in Living Color, where they did the homosexual 2 thumbs up or 2 snaps or whatever with Damon and Richard. I'm trying to think of his name, but I think y'all know who I'm talking about. David Greer and Damon Wayans. They would do the homosexual role. And they will exaggerate homosexuality when they're doing a homosexual role, and that made it funny, you know. And this was presented to us. And these are things that how we got to the process. I'd like to thank Avelina for showing up in Dwayne. I'll read a comment from Isha. She said Richard Pryor wore a dress in JoJo Dancer, and Eddie Murphy wore a dress in she said the Plumps. I think it was the Crumps, right? And Norbit. Yeah, I remember Norbit. And this is what I'm saying. It became to where more people were doing it, more of our comedians. But the important thing is understand that they did it with our comedians. We didn't see it a lot. That was meant, and to what, like I was saying with the Corona thing, we know that we like to laugh at things. And you could present things to us in laughter and comedy. So these are things that were presented to us in comedy. In the black and brown community, the whole homosexuality thing, it was there, but it was not accepted as it may have been accepted in other societies. It's still in some African and diaspora nations like Jamaica, things like, it's not really accepted and not acceptable. Not saying that it's not there, but you have to be more in the closet there. Here in this society is some things that's starting to be, well, how it is now. I mean, we know how it is now. To where we're saying, well, it's acceptable. Not only is it acceptable, it's like, well, you have to embrace that. And that's what I want to get into when later on the show, we're going to talk about the Dwayne Wade thing. But this is what I'm getting at with a process of it getting there. And even with our society, we had Mrs. Doubtfire, Robin Williams. He is a comedian. So comedians are doing this, dressing up as women and adjusting their bras and boob things and all this kind of stuff. And I remember Dustin Hoffman. Um, he did the movie called Tootsie in 1982. And Dustin Hoffman, it was not a comedian. This was a normal actor doing a comedic role, which is probably one of the few comedy roles that he probably ever did. But he did it dressing up as a woman. This is something that's being introduced to us. This is what's funny to society. And our black comedians, this is something that we have been, that is more pronounced with our black roles and our black comedians than it was. I mean, you have what the Tu Wong Fu with Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes is not a comedian, but then it's the same thing. Put him in a dress with Patrick Swayze and I forgot the dude's name, Laxiano, but that's the same thing. You have a serious actor, and then you put him in a dress. Patrick Swayze wasn't a comedian, but you put him in a dress. When you put the black person in a dress, it makes it funny too. This is okay. This is something that's funny, and this is what we're introducing to you. And this is what I'm getting at with the subliminal roles and the superliminal messages, where you're getting something over the top that you see and you know what it is, but the effects of it you're not aware of. That's what superliminal means, the superliminal perception. You're aware of what you're getting, your environment, but you're not aware of the consequences or the message that you're receiving or what you're getting from it. You're seeing it. They're not trying to sneak it by you. You're seeing it, it's over the top, but it's still having an effect on you that you're not aware of. So now all these things that we have, all these things that's art, anti-mimesis as far as I'm concerned, where the arts are used to affect us, and in some cases infect us, and affect the way we see things, how it's funny. And a lot of times I used to get in, I'll be talking to women and they say, well, that's funny to me. Like when we see somebody that's homosexual, gay, whatever, or transvestite, and I feel a certain way, and they be like, but nah, it's funny. It's funny. I think it's funny because, da 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 da, and whatever. So that's how things are presented. Now I'm not saying one way or another was right or was wrong, but I'm talking about society. I'm talking about in the black community. And if I'm afforded to talk more when we get into the Dwayne Wade conversation and situation, you'll understand what I'm saying, but I'm saying the way things have been presented to us. Now, another thing that and then of course what we have today, we have, we had Joanna Man, Miguel Nunez Jr. in 2002 playing, acting like he was a female basketball player, a woman basketball player. And he's actually, of course, he's a man dressing as a woman. And then we have Tyler Perry movies where Madea and everybody, that's funny. That's funny. He dressing up as a woman, an older woman, that's funny. It's presented to us in comedy. And so it's funny to us, and it's okay as long as you do it in comedy. And sometimes you see comedians on stage, they'll say things that's borderline like, whoa, you shouldn't have said that. But because they're comedians, they're allowed to get away with some of the things they're saying because it's like, hey, it's a joke. Now, if we're in the workplace and a white person say something, and you think about them saying, well, it's a joke. Nah, you're going to go to HR because that's not funny to you. But in society, if they present things as a joke, then it's okay. And Dave Chappelle, he went through a lot of heat because of his comedy show, but some of the things that he was allowed to say because it's comedy, that's the mask that they put on. And I'm not saying that that's what he was doing, but he was saying things about the LGBTQ community that a lot of those people were hypersensitive about. And what I want to say that we have to take away this hypersensitive nature. Now, you shouldn't be saying anything derogatory about anybody at any time. That's when you get into racial jokes or gender jokes and things like that. And it shouldn't be derogatory. And a lot of times in our workplace, they tell you stay away from that stuff because you could be offensive to people and you don't realize that you're being offensive. But when it's comedians, they tend to be able to get away with stuff like that. But I think we should be having these type of discussions, what's going on. And Aisha said, she said Wesley Snipes wore a dress. And yeah, and Tu Wong, Tu Wong Fu. I never watched it. I don't tend to watch those. And Deborah was letting me know it was Greer, and it was the Clumps. And Aisha said Nutty Professor and Robin Williams and Miss Doubtfire. I'm sorry I'm going behind on the notes. I'd like to thank Tracy for showing up. And Kayla, I will read her comment. She said, there's a duality to subliminal message of men dressing as women being seen as funny, and that is also shown as a lack of respect for women in general by men, or that men see women in a lesser value. Although the immediate representation of men in dresses affects the male role idea on a larger perspective, it also affects the representation of the role women in society of the role of women in society as well. And I appreciate those comments, and I really know what you're saying. I feel what you're saying, and that's true. And a lot of times when you're doing it in a comedic fashion, like I say, you exaggerate things. And a lot of times, like when we grow up, like we'll mock our parents, you know, when they're not around, and we say this is how it's on, but you exaggerate it, you know. And a lot of times, and this is what the blaxploitation did, it exaggerated a lot of things, and it made it okay to think that women are objects, sex objects, and not to be respected. And it was cool to not respect your woman, or not respect any woman, or not be in love, or not be in a nuclear family. You know, I don't have time for that. I'm being a player. 007. Every show 007 is you know, he's doing the same thing. He's with a bunch of women, and he was seen as being cool. And Aisha said Tom Hanks played, oh, I remember a show that Tom Hanks was in, but she said Tom Hanks played on the show Bosom Buddies in the 80s, where he had another man dressed as a woman to live in an apartment complex. I remember the name Bosom Buddies, but I don't remember watching it. I steer away from a lot of those things because that's not part of my diet. And like I said before, a diet is that's something that you ingest. I don't watch a lot of things that where I don't think is good for my diet, my mental diet, my sensory diet. And but I appreciate those comments. I appreciate Sheila for showing up, and Josh Castro I appreciate you showing up to the blueprint. So, and another thing that we talk about, and this is something where people control the narrative. When we're talking about the whole, now I'm going to change the steer in another direction because I do want to get to the Dwayne Wade thing. Now, when we're talking about, when people want to discuss the homosexuality thing, how we receive that, and a lot of what happens in the workplace, it's not to be spoken about. But I think it's important that you speak about things in your family and your family circles. And a lot of times we don't speak as a family unit about things like that until we're affected by things like that. And until you have someone in your family that's in this situation, then, and I don't think that we really speak freely in those moments either. And this is something I think that we need to be able to speak about. And what hinders that a lot of times when you have people that's in that community, the LGBTQ, they act as if they don't want you to speak freely. And to me, that's a hindrance on the acceptance of it, because you should be able to speak, and then that's how you get an understanding. You know, a lot of times when you're on social media and you're having a debate about racial issues, you know, you see where people stand, but they got to be able to voice their opinion, and then you got to be able to accept that they're voicing their opinion, and then you give a rebuttal, and you say giving it from they're giving it from their side, you're giving it from your side. And you have to have a conversation like that. You can't have a conversation, an open conversation with people where they're not permitted to speak their mind, and it's not an open conversation, and you're not really going to build anything with that. Now, another part where the narrative is controlled, when they talk about the God theory. A lot of people they have a religious faith and whatnot. They they take a stance that limit their ability to discuss homosexuality. Now, I'm saying, and the arts is being imposed upon us, and maybe it's being imposed upon us to as a sensitivity thing. I think there's many levels to that. That's a deep thing, and the subliminal and the superliminal perception of things when it's presented in an art form, there's maybe different reasons why they're doing it. Now, if I created a movie like She-Man, that was in 1967. If I was a producer and I did a movie like that today, it'd probably take a lot of backlash from the LGBTQ community if I say what part of the character, one of the characters, is a violent transvestite. And it's like, okay, they'll be like, well, why did you pick a transvestite to be violent? And why is this person blackmailing another man to take estrogen and dress up in lingerie? That whole script would get torn apart today because of course, a transvestite can be violent. A transvestite can blackmail people. If you're saying that they're normal people, if a normal person could do it, a transvestite could do it also. But it wouldn't be received that way, I don't think. Now, the God theory, a lot of times we don't want to discuss, a lot of people that's religious say, well, God don't make mistakes. For somebody to say, well, I was a man born in a woman's body, or I was a woman born in a man's body, and a lot of people will say, well, you can't say that if you believe in God, because that's, you're saying God makes mistakes. But the blatant part of that argument, that's what's wrong with that argument, and is people are born with physical defects, birth defects. Does that mean that are you ignoring that and saying, well, God don't make mistakes? No, you wasn't born like that. People could be born with any kind of abnormality that has nothing to do with a God, the perfection of God. Personally, I think that's how nature is meant to be. Things are meant to be, whether you're talking psychologically, people have psychological defects, people have physical defects, people have, for whatever reason, whether it's chromosomes or whatever, you have people that's Siamese twins where they didn't get separated in the womb and they were born joint, it's all kind of defects, and we could call it defects, but when you start talking about gender defects, the gender defects that we talk about is, this person was born with no parts, no gender parts, or they were born with both parts. Those are gender defects. If you can say that, and you can acknowledge that people are born like that, then what does that have to do with God? And the God theory doesn't come into effect in that. You don't say, well, no. If you could see it and say, well, this person was born with both male parts and female parts, then you're not going to say, no, that didn't happen, because God don't make mistakes. So I think that you have to get those blinders up. I don't think that has anything to do, if you believe in a religion that a God, that means that God is not perfect or anything like that. I'm saying get that narrative out the way, because then you have to explain to me, what does that have to do with any other kind of defect? And if I could say it's a defect, it has to be, what you're saying is that it is a defect, because if you're a man and you don't have the parts of a gender, parts of a man, then that's a defective thing. You're saying something is wrong. If I bought a Mercedes and I drove it off the lot and I put my right turn signal on and the left turn signal comes on anytime I put the right on, and the left turn signal comes on anytime I put the, in this bicycle, and I'm gonna bring it back and say something is wrong. When I do this, it does that. Something's wrong. It's a defect out of the warehouse or whatever. And it's okay to say that. But if you're saying that yes, I am in a man's body, but I am a woman, then that's something that's a defect. Something happened. Something went wrong. So if that something went wrong, then you have to basically say it's a defect. Now I'm not saying it's just the same thing as somebody that's a midget, somebody that's things like that. That's not normal. It's not natural for people to be born like that. It happens in nature, and but it is a abnormality, and it's something that's accepted. It's not something that you should be, you know. The part of it is, if I could, I'm gonna bring that to. If you have people that's born as, let's say that they're dwarfs or midgets or whatever, whatnot, you don't say, well, everything has to be. You can make things accessible, for one. That's how things is in society. Somebody in a wheelchair, you make things accessible for them. Somebody that's height, limitations, you make things accessible for them in the restroom and things like that. Now, the thing is, you don't bring everything down to their level and say, well, everybody, now people have to stoop down to do this and that. Because, and that's what I'm thinking happens in homosexuality, because they're, a lot of times people want everything to be as if this is the norm. This is okay. You can't speak about this, or you can't, and you should be okay. Everybody is different. I'm different. I'm different from somebody that has a Hispanic background. I'm different from somebody that has a white background. I'm different from somebody that has a European background. I'm different from somebody that was born in Africa. I'm different than somebody that's born in Jamaica. Things are different. There's physical differences. A person could be overweight, or what I'm saying is overweight. They could just be heavier, because they could be sensitive and say, well, you can't say overweight. Whereas, we can't be hypersensitive in just one aspect and not sensitive to the way other people feel. That's what I'm getting at. So what I'm saying is that's normal, and we should be able to discuss those things like that, but we shouldn't limit ourselves. And I see a lot of people limiting ourselves of saying, well, okay, when we're talking about these people in society, then those people don't want you to speak about it, or they only want you to speak about it in one form or fashion. And people have to be open to speak about things. Now, when we're getting into the Dwayne Wade situation, like I said, the whole God theory thing of God being imperfect, or the argument like that, or because that's a mistake, I don't think that, personally, it doesn't hold weight to me, logically, because there's other defects, or there's other things that happen with people, and you don't place that on a God concept. Dwayne Wade, his son Zion, born Zion, became Zaya. I'm sorry. And he came on the Ellen show, and on Valentine's Day, February the 14th. And if you look at that, I don't know how many of y'all watch Ellen. If you go back and look at the YouTube of it, he gives he tells the events that happened when his 12-year-old son came home and said, hey, you know what, I need to talk to y'all. I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. And my name is going to be Zaya. I want y'all to call me Zaya. And this is what it is, and this is how it's going to be. And Dwayne and Gabrielle, his wife, Gabrielle Union, it's the process that they went through, the acceptance and things like that. And if you think about, if that happened with you, if you had a child that came to you and said, hey, mom, dad, whatever, I need to talk to you. At that age, now there's a lot that's been said in support, a lot that's been said against, because Dwayne and Gabrielle, they allow, or they have allowed their son to become, to dress like a girl, change his name, and they present her as that. There's been a lot said both ways. Now, once I look, I stayed away from it. I just heard things until I started looking into it when I wanted to do the dress code. So that gave me a different understanding once I heard what he had to say. Now, there's been a lot of things out there where they're trying to make them transsexual and have them give them an operation. I mean, and I'm just interested. That's interesting. As a person, an adult, um, that's not in that situation, I probably have mixed feelings. But once I'm understanding how he feels and what he has said, um, that brings a different light to me. Now, that's something totally different than what I'm dealing with or what I was talking about in the dress code, but I did want to address that situation, or I want us to be able to communicate about things like that. Now, the other thing is, about a week or so later, within a week later, I believe it was February 18th, he went on the Today Show, I believe, one of those, Good Morning America, I think it was the Today Show, and they had an interview with him, and he said that his son slash daughter said that at the age of 3 that he knew that he was really a girl, that he did research. I mean, that was he knew when he was 3. That's what the child said. He's 12 now, but he knew when he was about 3 that he was um, transgender, but he was not gay. But he just felt like he was a female trapped in a male body. And Gabrielle, she put out a statement on Twitter. I'm going to read that. She said, "Me, Zaya, she's compassionate, loving, whip smart, and we are so proud of her. It's okay to listen to listen to and love and respect your child exactly as they are. Love, like good people." And like I said, they took a lot of backlash from that, and they have a lot of support from that from some positive entertainers. So this is a thing that you know. Now, and the reason I brought that up, the whole Zaya thing, is because people, the insensitivity, and it's two different things. You have two different things that's happening, two different dynamics. You have what has been presented to us in entertainment and how people want us to react and what people want us to accept. Now, you have different things in the LGBT community. You have some people that say, well, you know what, I'm gay. That's an attraction thing. You have some people that say, I'm born in the wrong body. That's different. That's not an attraction thing. When you're 12, when you're 9, that's not an attraction thing. So you have two different dynamics. And when we get into these conversations, we have to understand different dynamics of what we're dealing with, because a lot of us, we don't want to deal with it at all. But what if it was brought to you, brought in your side of your home, like it was with the Wade family? What would you do? How would you feel? These are things that I think we need to discuss, because we're talking about somebody else's household, but what if that was brought home to your household? How would you? Now, we've seen a lot of ways that people have not accepted that, where people have, you know, they've treated that child differently because it was a child. Sometimes that doesn't happen until they get older, and they won't come out of the closet, which they're saying that that's not the correct thing to say anymore, but they won't come out until they're older and they're an adult, because of the fear of how they will be received by their parents. And their parents may be of some kind of religious, strict religious guidelines and things like that. Or they may just be stringent in how they see a man and a woman, what they think should be and how it should be. But this is something that was brought home to them. And how they were handling it was in a public court. You know, everybody wants, because they are celebrities. You know, now the actress, Sharice Theron, whatever her name is, the way that she went about things when she adopted the little kid. And when the boy was, young, she was dressing him up as a girl. She was like, it's okay for you to be a princess at Halloween. He was like 3 years old, and a lot of that is that the influence, because people become so liberal, they say, because I mean, it's as a young kid, you don't know the difference. As a young boy, you 2 years old, you 3 years old, you may want to put on your dad's shoes, you may put on your mom's shoes, and you just walk around, and it's like, no. Some people say, no, you don't play with dolls. That's for girls. You don't do this. That's for boys. Da da da, and that's a normal situation. But what if you allowed that person, that girl, to do things that boys did? And sometimes we say, well, she's just being a tomboy, and okay, yeah, she likes to play football. She likes to play basketball. It's nothing wrong. At a time, women were not, or girls wasn't allowed to play basketball because that was a man thing. And now we have the WNBA, where some of them may be homosexual, some of them may not be. Just because you play sports don't mean you're homosexual. So it doesn't mean anything anymore in society. And sometimes girls want to play football, but that doesn't mean that they could be a tomboy, but that doesn't mean that that has anything to do with sexuality or, the gender thing. That's a discussion, and that's how society has changed and developed. And some people would say it deteriorated. And this is discussions that I think that people need to have, and also this discussions that I think we need to have. With all this being said, we need to have discussions of what's being allowed into our household by society, by the arts, what we think is funny, because everything, there's a whole lot of letters in the LGBTQ. There's a lot of letters in there. They're not all the same. They shouldn't be all clumped in the same. But also, what's permissible, what you decide is permissible to be in your household. You can't laugh at one thing. And I'm gonna give you another example. There's a lot of people in the older generation that's against the N word. You shouldn't say nigga. You shouldn't say nigga. You shouldn't say this. Black people shouldn't say it. No one should say it. But then those same people were the ones laughing at Richard Pryor albums, and Richard Pryor was using that word religiously. And it was funny when you were growing up listening to it, but now when you want to hear a rapper say it, it's you cringing. You're playing, you can't be both ways. Or if you understand what you used to do when you were younger and what was permissible to you, and I understand you want to change things, but you also have to allow that change to happen. You can't be, well, now you're on a more righteous road, and everybody doing this is shaking your head at, because you was once there. And you should be a little more understanding, if I could say that. But what I'm saying is, you can't look at a generation and say that generation is lost because they're doing this and your generation was doing the same thing, just in another form of entertainment. I'd like to thank Daryl for showing up. What's up, D? Appreciate you showing up to the blueprint. Now, the whole thing, like I say, we have to be able to separate when we're talking about different people. And when you're talking about something like that, that's different than what's being accepted or what's being promoted in the arts. Because what I would say, the abstraction that I would want in my household is a man to be a provider, a man to be a protector, a man to be that pillar, and a woman to be that nurturer, that woman to be that provider inside the home. I think that, me being that people would call it old fashioned, I think that there's certain things that a young male should be doing around the house, and there's certain things that a young woman should be doing around the house, a young female should be doing around the house. If the grass need to be cut, I'm not going to say, my daughter was, y'all got to switch times cutting the grass. I'm not going to do that. But in today's society, if I say, well, the dishes need to be washed or whatever, or somebody needs to learn to cook, a lot of times today we're like, well, both of them can learn how to cook. And I understand that. I understand what you're saying. And it's like, yeah, you want your son to learn how to cook, but I may be more like learn how to cook for yourself. Or you can learn how to cook. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I said, well, you know what, my daughter need to be out there cutting the grass and she need to be out there helping to change the oil and change the tire too, you know, I don't think that the line should be blurred because I think that's part of what's happening in society and what's wrong with society. They're not letting men be men. They're not making women be women. And we're getting into a dangerous place where identities are not, it's hard to identify. You know, you have ultra sensitive men and hard women, you know, women acting like they DMX and men acting like, but you know, this is what I'm saying. And these are things that I think we need to discuss in our household, things that you want to present, the image that you want to present. Men and women are different. And a lot of times I hear women say, well, you know what, I don't know why men could do this and women can't. Well, we're not the same. And you have to understand that. And men can't do the same thing as women do. And women can't do the same thing. And if I want a nuclear household, and we're talking about bettering our communities, and I understand you could be in a one-parent household where mother may have to do more things and take on more roles. But you have to understand that's an abnormality. That's not normal. That's not how it should be. And if we see that as something and if we take that on as something as being normal, then your kids would take that on and be like, I don't need a man because my mom did. My mom didn't need a man to raise us. You know, I could do this, and that's not a nuclear. That's not the best that you could do for your kids. You need to have a nuclear household, as far as I'm concerned. You need to have guidelines. This is what a man should be doing. This is what a father should be doing. This is what a man should represent and what a father should represent. This is what a woman should be doing. This is what a woman should represent, and this is how a woman should present herself. And there are differences, and it's okay for us to be different. And sometimes people are not born in those guidelines, but that has to be explained and understood as far as I'm concerned. You know, I had a guy that he was a friend of mine, but, you know, me and him would have these discussions. And my thing was you can't blur those lines. Now, you may be pro homosexual, and that's fine, and then people could be pro homosexual, but you can't sit here and tell me that that's everybody could just do whatever they want to do. And you can't tell me that some kind of homosexual activity is not homosexuality, like the thing with Tank. Me and him got into it with that. You can't tell me a man having sexual desires for another man is not homosexuality. You can't do that, because that's the definition of homosexuality. And you trying to blur those lines because you have an agenda, or you have, you could feel a certain way about the LGBTQ community, but they are people. They are who they are. You can't make that the normality. That you can't make that normal with everyone else. You got to say, okay, hey, this is who I am, and I may be different, and accept my differences for what they are. That's different than trying to make everybody else like there's no guidelines. We're all just, yeah, I could do this. I could have affection for another man, and that don't make me gay. You can't do that, because that's not the definition of being a man, being a woman, and being homosexual or whatever. Homosexual is having a sexual affinity for somebody of the same sex. It's not the same as being transgender, transvestite, or whatever you want to talk about. Those are not the same things, and you can't clump things together, and you can't clump everyone in together. That's what I wanted to say, if I got that across. The dress code. But just understand things that I think wars are being waged, and some people that's being used as pawns in that game that may be part of that community don't understand the pawns. And of course, if as a black person, I'm not going to sit here and try to tell a white person we're all the same. We're not. I understand that I'm different from you. You're different from me. And I may be wanted things, I want to be treated the same, by the laws and things like that. That's a whole different thing to acting as if we are the same, that we are not, that we don't have differences. We all have differences. We all have ways of doing things. I'm proud of my differences. You should be proud of your differences, but that don't make your differences don't make you better than me. And I'm not saying that my differences gonna make me better than you. I'm just saying I'm proud to be different. As men and women, we are different. My differences don't make me better than you. Your difference don't make me better than you better than me. We are different. We are meant to complement each other. You have other people that's different, you know, and you take that however you want. But that's the show this week. I want to thank everyone who showed up to the dress code. But I think that what happens in society, we have to be cognizant of what's happening and how people try to affect us and infect us with the way we're doing. My thing on the blueprint, I want in our black, brown, all our communities, I think we need to have more nuclear or healthy household. And when I'm saying healthy, I'm talking about functioning household. That's how I'm gonna put it, like that. And if it's the same thing as having a single parent household, and I implore our men, you know, take care of your kids, take care of your family, be providers, be protectors. The way we treat our women, we need to change that if we're not doing it and it's not healthy. So I'm not talking about, oh, well, Kevin's saying that if you're homosexual, that's not healthy. I'm not saying anything like that. That has nothing to do with me. That's not in my household right now. I think we need to have those discussions as a family unit, how we're going to deal with things, how we would deal with things if we have someone in our family that comes out of the closet, how we're going to talk to our kids. It's a deal with think if somebody come home and they're born with a birth defect, or you got an uncle that came and he's like this, same thing you tell your kids, whatever you're going to talk to them, you got to, and that's one thing I like about what Dwayne Wade was saying. He was talking about, the maturity process that they had to go through, dealing with what they had to deal with. And I think that many of us should understand and listen to that. But also there's another aspect of that, of how things are being used against us in the black and brown community, and trying to cripple our communities. And that's the blueprint, y'all. I appreciate y'all showing up. Kevin Lewis on the blueprint. Hopefully I have a better show for y'all next week. Peace.